Despite Amnesia being such an old game, there are still many mysteries to uncover. And one of these was Justine's Crypt slowdown skip, which is now solved. The Crypt level has a maze that slows down the player with randomized speed. But people notice that sometimes it doesn't slow down the player at all. Years ago, many theories were discussed. Did jumping affect it? What about using the shovel to launch yourself into the trigger? People were able to replicate it, although not consistently. And after all this time, while analyzing scripts for other levels for an unrelated project, I decided to look at the Crypt script while I was at it. The maze is contained in a trigger that detects when the player is entering or exiting it. When entering, this piece of code runs, and when exiting, this other piece of code runs. After entering the maze, the game waits somewhere between 0 and 3 seconds before starting a timer loop. That causes this timer random look function to repeatedly execute, with an interval of between 3 and 6 seconds. And every time this executes, it randomizes the player's movement speed. GB stop head sway is a global variable that's initialized to false, and exiting the maze sets it to true. And the next time the timer random look executes, it checks the variable, and if it's true, it will flip it back to false and it will reset the player's movement speed and then exit the loop. Let's see this in action. I added a couple debug messages so we can see what's going on. I'll use a diagram to show the slowdown timers at play and the value of the GB stop head sway variable. The arrows represent the time the timer waits before executing the code. And notice how after entering the maze, there's a delay before the script randomizes the player's speed. And likewise, after leaving, there's a delay before the speed resets to normal again. The first interesting thing is that if you enter again, and exit the maze all before one of these loops start, then 2 loops will start. One loop will get killed off by the GB stop head sway variable, but the second one stays. So now you're slowed down even though you're outside the maze, which shouldn't happen. If you enter the maze now, there will be 2 slowdown loops happening. If you spam enter and exit the maze, you can have more timer loops going at once. And even if the slowdown loop starts instantly, there's still a delay until the next iteration, so this would still work. The second interesting thing would be if there's a way to be inside the maze without a slowdown loop going. The only way that is possible is if this GB stop head sway variable is set to true before entering the maze, and entering the maze will immediately kill the slowdown loop. But the only way to get this variable set to true is by leaving the maze, which you can't do without first entering it, so it seems impossible. But the thing is, this variable is only initialized to false when the level script is compiled, which happens when the level first loads. But quick loading the map while already being in it doesn't recompile the script. So if you enter the maze and then leave it, and quick load before this variable gets consumed, you'll be outside the maze with the variable set to true, and then entering the maze will kill the slowdown loop. Bam! Looking back at the videos posted of this, they all seem to be done right after quick loading, which can be explained by this. Some people think they had done it in actual runs, which initially made me think there was more to uncover to account for that. But asking further, nobody was confident they had actually done it in a run, and it's also just been so long since then. And of course, nobody has a video showing it happen in a regular run. And looking at the code, it's not possible for it to happen in a run. Or is it? We're able to activate multiple timers at once as previously mentioned, and if these timers ran multi-threaded, then perhaps there could be a race condition. If 2 timers are running this code independently, if GB stop head sway was true, then timer 1 can evaluate it to true, but before it could flip the variable to false, timer 2 also evaluates it to true. And so both of these timers enter this if statement. So what if we enter the maze, leave the maze, and re-enter the maze? And then this would set GB stop head sway to true, but we have 2 timers going. And if these 2 timers both happen to end at the exact same time, and the thread scheduler decides to interleave the operations between them, then maybe both of them can be killed off, leaving us with full move speed. So I tried doing a proof of concept where I spawned thousands of timers, and I also added a delay between these two operations within a timer to make it more likely for another thread to evaluate the variable to true before it gets flipped to false. These thousands of timers reduced my FPS down to a crawl, and my game froze when leaving the maze, meaning timers just run single-threaded. The game just loops through a list of timers and processes each of them independently. So, alas, I'm afraid this is the end of the story, and I'm glad we finally understand what's going on here. Nothing here can be exploited, but having this experience can help us figure out other glitches in the future. Thanks for watching.